Good afternoon, good evening, and good night, if you have reference. Um, Good afternoon, teachers and fellow friends. Today we'll be looking at the very last presentation of this whole semester. We'll be inserting Manuel through Etymology of the Closet by Sedgwick. So when the readers first encounter Irishers, the men in the well, they almost always ask the exact same question: why don't the children help? It presents itself as a chilling moral puzzle. The human being is trapped in a dark, deep hole, trying out survival, and a group of otherwise normal children choose to be condemned. Because the story never gives it a simple explanation for their cruelty, we're left feeling incredibly uncomfortable. Today, we want to suggest that this initial question, while completely natural, is actually a bit of a trap. How? It treats morality as if it is just a simple individual choice. Instead of asking why the children fail as moral individuals, we need to ask what happens to the structure of their social world once the well enters the story. The moment the children discover the well, a massive shift occurs. The relationships with each other change. We get to know what shifts. Climate rules are created, and the very definition of safety and vulnerability is completely rewritten. To have this transformation, we're going to look at a tool from a famous scholar named Eve Kosovsky said in her book. Her why she researched it, it's a academically appropriate. Um, Her book, Etymology of the Closet, she talked about acting two. Well, Sedgwick is famous for writing about identity and gender. The core idea here is actually very simple. It is about the power dynamics of secrets. It is about who gets to stay safely hidden, who is forced to show themselves, and how we use social categories to judge and control other people.
Before we move on, I have to remind everyone from the audience, you are all being recorded.
Audio wise. Now, first glance, bring in a theorist who wrote about the Claudette to analyze the story about children in abandoned well might seem like a bizarre choice. There are no romantic plot lines in Scher's text, and there is no explicit discussion of sexuality. Why then should we return to Sedgwick? The answer lies in understanding what Sedgwick is actually studying. She's not just cataloging identities, she's diagnosing how information and power work together. Her focus is on the mechanics of secrets. The power to know things, who is kept in the dark, who is forced to show their face, who is allowed to remain safely anonymous. She shows us that the closet is not just a metaphor for her identity, but a highly active tool of social control. This diagram shows the four areas we will track today. First, we'll be looking at space, the physical environment of the well, and how it isolates the character. Second, we will look at recognition. Yes, the terrifying moment when a one-way observation becomes a two-way street of being known. Third, we'll analyze emotional behavior, and the children use silence not just as doing nothing, but as an active, exhausting job to protect their secret. Finally, we'll be looking at gender expectations, breaking down how we, as readers, bring rigid ideas about boys and girls to the text to make sense of the children's security. Sure. By using Sedgwick's tools, we can see that the man in the well is not just a simple fable about peer pressure. It is a terrifyingly precise demonstration of how human groups use secrecy, silence, and selective exposure to protect their own power and avoid the vulnerability of being known. The well as a social arena. Before we can analyze the man at the bottom of the well, we need to look closely at the physical space where this happens. Yes, this is done by AI with a lot of promise. The well is not in the middle of a busy town. It's not somewhere parents can easily see from their kitchen windows. It sits abandoned in a massive empty field, a physical blank space far away from adult rules, laws, and protection. In social theory, we call this a space of exception, a place where normal rules of everyday life are suspended. But looking through our Saint-Lucian lens, we see that this empty space does not stay empty. Instead, it acts like a pressure cooker that immediately starts creating new, highly rigid social order among the children. Think about how the children behaved before they found the well. They were playing unstructured games, running around, laughing, existing as relatively equal groups of friends. But the very second they stand around the edge of the well, that equality vanishes. Without a single word being spoken, a specialized hierarchy forms. Some children step forward to speak, others back away and watch silently. Some become caretakers, dropping bread and water down, while others act as silent guards, making sure that the secret does not get out. This is one of Sedgwick's most important insights. Social systems are most powerful. Sorry, social systems are most powerful when they do not announce themselves. Nobody sat the children down and assigned them these roles. Yet, every single child immediately learned their place in the hierarchy and played their part perfectly. The well creates a silent constitution. It proves that when we step out of normal authority, we do not actually enter a state of pure young peace. Instead, we actually enter a state of we actually instinctively build a new unquestioned system of control to manage the fear of the unknown. Let's move on to the very first stability. Just one second. Right. The first is stability. The social order of the children built around the world initially depends on a very comforting division of power. The physical setup of the well suggests a clean, unshakable boundary. The children are above, the man is below. The children are free, the man is trapped. The children are proud watchers, the man is a helpless object of their base. This vertical setup gives children an immediate, intoxicating feeling of absolute control. They have food, they control its access to the sun, to water, to physical rest. Yet, Schur's story quietly removes this clean division almost immediately. If the children truly saw the man as just a victim who needed help, they would go tell the adult. If they saw him as a monster or a dangerous threat instead, they would run away and never come back. However, they do something highly unstable. They occupy a weird middle ground. They return day after day, spending hours lying in the grass, bringing food, having repetitive circular conversations with him. This obsessive behavior reveals a deep, unspoken dependence. The children's freedom is no longer truly free. It has become anchored to the man's captivity. They need him, stay trapped in that well in order to keep their new existing status as powerful observers. The vertical axis they thought kept them perfectly safe. It's actually become an emotional cage, binding their daily lives to the dark hole in the field. The categories of captor and captive begin to blur, showing us that power is never a simple one-way street, a fragile, unstable relationship that collapses any second. Observation of Satan. To understand why the children can tolerate this bizarre, cruel relationship for so long, we have to look at how information flows between them. Up until the middle of the story, the children operate from a position of absolute safety. Flow of information is strictly one way from the man to the children. The man doesn't get anything in return. Kids stand in brilliant sunlight looking down into a pitch black shaft. They can hear the raw, coughing voice of man. Measure its desperation. They can choose exactly what information to feed him, including the lie that help us. Meanwhile, the man is completely blinded. He's trapped in a vertical stone prison, unable to see their faces, count how many of them there are, or verify anything that they say. This is the power of the one-way mirror. The children are wrapped in a protective shadow of the well's edge. The man is completely exposed, subjected to constant invisible surveillance. This extreme imbalance of information is what makes the situation feel safe to the children. Anonymity acts as their shield. The man does not know who they are, where they live, or what they earn on. They can perform acts of fake charity, dropping bags of bread, without feeling any real moral responsibility. They can play at being gods, treating his survival as a private game, precisely because they are insulated from the consequences of being murderers. The morality depends entirely on their visibility. The dark well is not just a trap for the man, it is a protective barrier that prevents their cruel actions from becoming punishable. Real world reality. However, reciprocity is not reciprocity meaning getting something in return, like vice versa. It is such a cool concept that I love this. The turning point of the entire story happens when Wendy accidentally slips and says Aaron's name out loud. At first glance, this seems like a minor, trivial mistake. After all, it is only a single word spoken into the wind. The physical reality of this scene is exactly the same. The man still broken and helpless at the bottom of the well. The children are standing safely in the sunlight, completely out of his physical reach. Yet, the emotional atmosphere of the story collapses in a single second. Why? Because the direction of information has suddenly reversed. Their one-way mirror has shattered. For the very first time, the man possesses a piece of defining data about one of his characters. The relationship is no longer a one-way street of observation. It has become a space of mutual recognition. The man is no longer a passive object to be watched and fed. He has suddenly become an active, dangerous subject capable of naming, classifying, and tracking. This is the exact moment where Sedgwick's ideas about the politics of knowledge become essential. What makes Aaron panic is not threat of physical violence. The man obviously cannot just magically climb out to hurt him. What makes him panic in the horror is being seen. He has been dragged out of the safe, anonymous dark and thrust into the blinding light of exposure. The graphics on this slide visualizes the panic of this sudden transition. The opponent remains completely invisible. You see how Aaron has his name, his level, his age, suppose the narrative of that. His HP has gone down. Well, the wealth, no name, no level, no nothing, but he is vulnerable because he is. He is. And and Aaron has a few options. So the opponent remains completely invisible. You never see the man's face. You never learn his name. As though he stays hidden, he knows he now holds the key to Aaron's identity. Now, Aaron's initial immediate frantic response, screaming out the names of every other child in the group, Aaron. Not just an act of random cruelty. There's a highly calculated, desperate attempt to share the danger. Aaron is the only one named. He has to carry the entire weight of the guilt and exposure. By naming everyone else, he forces the entire group to be as vulnerable as he is. If everyone is known, then no single kid can be singled out for punishment. The real battle of the story is not between the children and the men. It's between the comfort of staying invisible and the terrifying vulnerability of being known. So you should retaliate, which is to return whatever what they did. Next, we have the well as an epistemological mirror. You can see like
So we now have 2 minutes of them.
it's like a mirror. Yeah. As we move past the crisis of the name drop, the physical nature of the well goes through a deep psychological transformation. The story began with a group of children peering into a dark hole to watch a desperate stranger. It ends with a dark hole that seems to look right back at judgment. The well has transformed from a telescope to a mirror. What terrifies the children now is no longer the physical presence of the men at the bottom. What terrifies them is the reflection of their own capacity for cruelty, compartmentalization, and betrayal. At the bottom of this shaft, they do not see a victim no more. What they see is their own reflection as jailers. To save the man now is impossible, because saving him means bring him up into the light of the adult world. And bringing him into the light means their silence will be exposed as crime. The man must remain in the well to protect their illusion of innocence. The well, therefore, becomes a monument to their own self-imprisonment. They're chained to this field, unable to play by the well, yet completely unable to forget it. It proves that the moment we try to treat a human being as a mere object, we permanently ruin our own ability to exist as free, moral people. Science as productive labor. Now, to understand how the children manage the psychological weight of keeping a man trapped, we have to look at Sedgwick's analysis of the open secret. In her work, Sedgwick argues that an open secret basically meaning something that is known by everyone in the social circle but is banned from being spoken about openly, not a passive vacuum. It is not an empty space where nothing happens. Instead, it is an active force that requires massive social effort to keep alive. The children's silence is not just doing nothing. It is a highly coordinated, exhausting performance of denial. Think of the immense energy required to sit at the dinner table with their parents, to eat their meals, to do their homework, to look their mothers in the eye, while carrying the dark knowledge of a dying man. This silence must be actively protected. Every glance, every word, every shared silence between the children must be carefully managed to make sure the secret is not leaked. This collective silence serves a very specific purpose. It maintains distance, prevents the reality of the well from crossing over into the adult world, where it would immediately be labeled as a crime or a tragedy. By keeping a secret locked inside a peer group, they protect the fragile illusion of their own childhood innocence. The open secret acts as a wall, keeping the horror of their actions locked away in private closet, proving that silence is often the loudest and most violent action the group can perform. Now, why is the narrator's gender unknown? Hmm. Let's look at one of the most brilliant stylistic choices in Irish's text. The gender of our first person narrator is never revealed. We know that the narrator is 9 years old. We know that they are a member of the group, but we never learn their name, their pronouns, or their gender. Very smart, I remember sure. But we apply Sedgwick's magnitude, which warns us that categories of gender are highly unstable and should not be used to automatically explain human behavior. We cannot conduct a fascinating experiment. Why does our brain immediately try to classify this narrator the moment we start reading? And from the very first classes, I noticed that everyone assumed that the narrator was a boy. I had a different thought instead.
We thought they were alone.
Yes. So it goes to show how like the anonymity is crucial to the interpretation of the text. What changes in our moral interpretation of the story if we assume the narrator is a boy versus if we assume the narrator is a girl? If we assume if you can, yes. If you assume that the narrator is male, we tend to bring in classic literary tropes of boyish competitive play, pack behavior, which means playing groups, and emotional attachment. We excuse the cruelty as an expected, unfortunate symptom of masculine peer pressure. On the other hand, if we assume a female narrator, our moral outrage changes completely. We read the coldness as a shocking, almost monstrous betrayal of natural feminine empathy, caregiving, and kindness. The narrator's behavior is read not as peer pressure, but as highly manipulative, passive-aggressive calculation. But notice this, the physical actions in the text remain completely identical. The only thing that changes in the gender category, we, readers, import to make sense of the violence. This is a pure demonstration of axiom 2. Irisher forces us to confront our own desperate need to categorize. He proves that these social categories do not just describe human behavior, they actively manufacture objectives.
Okay, so moving on to what we're going to mention the characters in the Mandalorian. When so, unlike the narrator, Wendy is explicitly gendered, and she is a highly complex and confusing character in the story. Initially, Wendy fits the stereotypical traditional expectation of feminine empathy. In the story, she's one of the kids who speaks to a man in a gentle, caring way, and her accidental slip to Aaron's name can also be read as some kind of emotional slip over of care, caring towards the man well. Yet Ira Share refuses to let us settle into this comfortable civil life. The most we know about what this character happens after the name drop. When the man begins calling out the name, the group runs away, except for Wendy. The solitary lingering presence can be read in two different ways. One, we can read in a positive way, to be more resilient, devoted to connection, and not being able to abandon her to the. On the other hand, we can see her as a monster. We can see her through a such wicked lens where her delay can be read as a highly pathological exercise of Edward power. We can interpret her per se, her faith with the man has an absolute monopoly over his survival. By refusing to run, Wendy defies easy satisfaction as either pure self-sacrifice behavior or brutal sadistic behavior. She comes out of that territory of infinite prolonged watching, proving that vulnerability is never free predictable place. Next, we're going to talk about the children's family. So it would be easy to look at the children's behavior well and conclude they're just evil kids. But to do that is to ignore the home that these children come from. The children did not invent the mechanics of the closet, open secrets, or there was no detachment. Since they are children, who they are most likely thought like someone, and that someone is close to them and would have most likely be their family. Consider the narrator's own life. We learn that the narrator's mother is prone to fit, also silent, highly visible weeping at the kitchen table, while the father is just there to be there. Humbling himself and repeating to ask about his wife's hobbies. The household is already a highly structured network of open secrets. The mother stands the massive visible impact, yet it will never end up in a family discussion. The family obviously survives by looking away and ignoring everything. They treat away. The one is a literal physical manifestation of the structural closet they negotiate every single day at the kitchen table. They treat the man exactly how they treat their mother's tears. And something to be watched, including a few awkward moments, but never overly discussed or resolved. Okay, so now we go to the structured aspect of vulnerability. This isn't really confirmed when we looked at our activities. Yeah, it's a station. To bring our circle to reading of the story together, we can see the structure here. Let's start with the line one. We might assume that his exposure is up 100%, but if we analyze that closely, he never gives up his name. He never gives, he never, his face is completely in the and the and he actually gains massive psychological leverage over the children once to know their name. He, their identity is as a weapon, and that's why we place them at somewhere around 70%. He maintains what we call an epistemic shield, the power of not knowing, the power of not being fully known. Yeah. Okay, next is the narrative. To us, the reader, the narrator is a ghost, a blank space with no name and no letter. We might think that they are fully safe at 15%, but inside the social reality of the story, Aaron scraped out the narrator's name too. This creates some sort of another exposure, around 60% exposed within their work, yet still masked to us, the reader. Okay, so this leaves Aaron as our top vulnerable child. His first to be named is the one who completely breaks down, and he is exposed to both the man and the group. And that's why that is 1%. Wendy is just at 5%. Up in that middle zone, having her name exposed, but she's still just figure. This chart highlights that the ultimate weapon in special relationships in the power of this collective disclosure. The children do not fear the man. They fear losing control over their visibility. They choose silence as their primary defense, sacrificing the man's life to preserve their own position of invisible safety. Lastly, we go back to the map. We began this presentation with a simple nostalgic map of childhood, where rules are clear, these are innocent, and adventures are uncomplicated. But by applying each century's accent to, we have used back at black nostalgic service to reveal an unnecessary moment of secret keeping and emotional survival. The wildlife remains in the center of the map. It's not dangerous, but it stands as a chilling monument of the fragility of the categories we use to organize our life, which is the categories of childhood innocence, masculine and feminine behavior, capture and victim, or freedom and activity. The man in the well is a warm that us that our comforting social lives are constantly haunted by the threat of birth or exposure. It proves that the moment we choose to look away from another human being suffering to preserve our own private safety, we do not fully secure our own freedom. A
Okay,
Okay, and that should wrap up every single presentation of this semester.
woo-hoo, yeah.
Woo-hoo.
Do we have questions from the audience for this last presentation?
outbreak.
No, we do not. And for gift and shiggles, I just want to show this red flag again.
You're welcome.
Okay, yeah, here's the microphone. Are there any questions from the audience? Okay, because if you don't have questions, I have questions. Yeah, all right, so group 6, cool. My first question is, why did you guys decide to go from last week's really creative presentation style to this week's more traditional lecture style presentation?
Yes, I'll have to say, the time that we have left is a very substantial driver for that reason.
Okay, so basically because you didn't have enough time to do something more creative.
Exactly. However, we wanted to find a way to compensate for, like the drop in dopamine level. So we thought of like, bringing theories into visuals that I use. And that also applies to our previous presentation.
Okay, yeah. The visual style that you chose to do for your presentation, I think, fit quite well with your conclusion about how what looks like a story about childhood nostalgia actually encompasses many deeper and even darker themes. So that when we finish listening to your presentation and we look back on your slides, instead of feeling, oh, it's fun, it might start feeling a bit creepy. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you like it. So my next question is, it feels like a lot of the ideas that you're presenting seem to be quite familiar or even general ideas, like the idea of the epistemological mirror. Group 5 talked about a kind of mirror. When we talk about visibility, group 2 talked about visibility. So how do you distinguish the ideas in your presentation from previous ideas? Or another way to ask this is, how closely are you following Sedgwick's essay?
As we mentioned in the presentation, there's not much, we'd say there's not much to bring down in terms of like sexuality and sex and stuff like that. Yes, we've suggested some ideas about like probably man as a father figure in the house, but the interpret it in some kind of way related to sexuality, but we thought that it was too far off to actually have like a backed up interpretation. So mostly we stick to the idea of disclosure and concealment.
Okay, yeah. I was thinking about this as I was listening to your presentation. When I was talking with you guys in the previous week, I offered some ideas you might consider. And one of the ideas was about homosocial relations between same-sex people. But that idea also was not in the actual essay, it was in the introduction to the essay. So I can't exactly blame you for not sticking to the essay itself.
Two was about is like differentiating gender and sexuality and sex and stuff like that. So it's only a very, I think, a minor foundation in her like entire book. And most of our ideas were based off of like other stuff unrelated to the separation of terms.
Right, right. I think I'm not doubting you. I'm sure that the ideas you mentioned are related to Cedric's ideas in a broader sense. But I do wish that at least for each slide, you can like make a link to what you believe are the related ideas from Sedgwick for that slide. And it would have helped us understand the connection better as well. Yeah. All right. So you guys are the last group. This is the last presentation. Do you have any final thoughts?
I think that we should all be getting ready for the final, unfortunately. And the fact that it's the book it's yeah.
A blessing and a curse?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, we probably will have a lot of time left today, so I'll get into that a bit later. Thank you guys once again. All right, so as we just heard, because this story involves literally no sex, at most they might talk about gender. So they decided to use some ideas from the author's introduction, the introduction to the author that comes before the essay itself. And in this case, I think it's fine. So in fact, the logic of most of their presentation was structured around the idea of the closet as a metaphor. The closet as a metaphor is not just about visibility, it's also about protection. Why do queer people decide to stay in the closet or sometimes go back into the closet? Because it feels safer. Because they're inside the closet, they are not exposed to the biases and judgments of mainstream society. And so throughout a lot of their presentation, they were talking about this kind of dialectic. If you're in the closet, you might feel constrained, but you might also feel safer. Whereas if you leave the closet, you're freer to do what you believe you should do, but you're also more vulnerable to others' reactions, judgments, and pressures. So they were talking about this in relation to the group dynamics between the kids and also the dynamics between the kids and the man. If the kids' anonymity, as they said, protected them, it's like they're staying in the closet in relation to the man. Whereas once Aaron starts sharing their names, then they are brought out of the closet into the light and exposed. I do have to admit though, like the slide about Wendy, whether she is like good or bad, that slide kind of mystified me. The previous slide about how we think of different characters differently according to gender, that makes sense. If I had to say, I think your slide about Wendy, do you still have it? Can you go back? All right. Yeah, so I'm also recording the screen, audio and screen. The next one. Yeah, this one. By refusing to run, Wendy defies easy classification as either the pure self-sacrificing savior or the detached sadistic jailer. She carves out a complex territory of intimate, prolonged watching, proving that vulnerability is never a clean and predictable place. Let's take this sentence by sentence. So first of all, I'm not sure how exactly the previous slide regarding how we interpret the main character as either boy or girl might be related to this in terms of like how Wendy's gender influences our interpretation. But if that is part of your argument, then in fact, what this first sentence is invoking is the infamous Madonna whore complex, where under a patriarchal gaze, women are often perceived of as either better than or worse than, in this case, people. So like in Western patriarchal culture, we have the two female archetypes of, I can't remember her name, Mary, Mother of Jesus, right? who is the Holy Madonna, virgin birth, right? Never defiled by anything sexual or anything like male. And on the other side, you have colloquial or traditionally the whore, the sex worker, we would say today, a woman whose social value mainly lies in the use of sexuality. And so the Madonna whore complex describes how in a patriarchal society, people, notably men, but not limited to men, often can only see women in one of these two terms. So this seems to be either talking about or performing this logic by talking about how it's hard to make sense of Wendy either as pure or sadistic, good or bad, Madonna or whore. In this case, it's not really related to sex, but the binary logic is still there. Now, the second sentence. In this context, talking about watching brings up ideas of voyeurism, the peeping Tom. And then the reverse of that, if we talk about the logic of the closet, vulnerability is being seen. So here we have a different binary of seeing or being seen. And in either case, it's an intimate relation, assuming you know that someone is looking at you. But again, I'm not quite sure how that's related to whether or not this territory, whatever the territory is or is not a clean, predictable space. Are you trying to say that whenever you look into the abyss also looks into you? Like every peeping Tom is also vulnerable to being seen? Something like that? Okay, so if we take these two ideas together, it's saying that Wendy doesn't cleanly fit into the Madonna whore complex and that something gaze. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what this slide is trying to say. And I think it would be more clear if you linked it to specific ideas that you found in Sedgwick's work. Yeah, so like we're almost there. But then going back to hi everyone else, the rest of the class, other parts of Group 6's presentation here do deal more directly with gender, talking about the identity of the narrator, talking about like the relation to family. But they didn't, I don't think you guys talked about the fact that the guy in the well is a man, right? Yeah, so I mean, that could have been quite interesting. How would the story feel different if it were the woman in the well? Or the non-binary person in the well? Or like I said earlier, the llama in the well? We might feel differently about it. The kids might also feel differently about it. Yeah, so yeah, if you had found a few more ways to talk more directly about at least gender. Yeah. Although on the other hand, of course, Sedgwick's essay is in part a deconstruction of that identity, right? Whether you are man or woman, female or male, does not necessarily mean blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Right. This deconstruction you guys did cover in the presentation. Yeah. All right. So that concludes the presentation part of this class. Any questions? All right, if you don't have questions, let's do something else. So thank you guys, you can go back to your seats. I'll upload this. Actually, I don't need to upload this. I'll just upload the whole video. So I'll close this.
I think it's there, but
All right, thanks. Right, okay, so as you all know, there will be a final exam for this class next week. Let's talk a bit about that. I think most of you are freshmen, right? So have you guys ever done essay questions before? Okay, good. Have you, there are two kinds of essay questions. Have you guys done open-ended essay questions before? A few of you. Okay, so let's quickly cover that part. Not quickly, let's take our time and slowly cover that. So let me show you what the exam will look like. There's a preview file secretly hidden on Moodle. It looks like this. All right. The exam is open book. You may use paper materials only. It will be graded according to breadth and accuracy of evidence, which means you must include source title and page numbers. So that's the first one, right? Breadth and accuracy of evidence. The second one is logic. The third one is coherence. Feel free to ask me questions. You do not have to return these question sheets with your answer sheet. Did you notice the plural, these question sheets? Yeah. So if you look at number 2, read the blah, blah, blah on the following pages. You're going to get more than one page. Does it change your understanding of blah, blah, blah? If so, how? If not, why not? So this is actually a double interpretation question. Kind of like your presentation, right? First, you have to interpret your essay, and then you have to use the ideas in the essay to interpret the story. It's a double interpretation. Same thing here. First, you have to make sense of whatever I give you to read, and then you have to think about your understanding of whatever this is. Now, the real trick is question 1. You'll notice I've hidden most of question 1. I'm showing you like 1/4 of the question. Offer an interpretation of blah, 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 blah. So you know that it's not just going to be interpret this thing, right? The blank is too long. I can tell you now, question 1 will also be a double interpretation question. You will also have to deal with 2 things. So I'll guide you through like how to think about these questions. Let's first take a look at the rules. So it's open book, but you can only use paper materials. So you can't look at your phone, but you can print stuff out and bring it to class. When I was a student, one time a class I was taking had one of these, and a classmate brought like a suitcase luggage full of books to class. She didn't use any of it, but she brought it. And that brings us to the main issue about open book exams. The more materials you have, the more time you will have to spend looking through those materials. So in fact, what's the best way to prepare during this week? Get a basic understanding of the structure of your materials. You don't need to memorize everything. You have to memorize where to find things. Does that make sense? Yeah. I'll also tell you the exam is designed so that if you have been a good student throughout this semester, you will not need extra materials more than the course packet. Everything you'll need is in there. Now, the question for you is, do you understand everything in there? And if there are some parts you still don't understand, that's when you think about what other stuff you might want to bring. You know, the questions look kind of hard, but I try to be a kind and merciful exam administrator. If I were an evil and manipulative exam administrator, the question would have been, offer an interpretation of The Man in the Well using Lacanian psychoanalysis. And if your group presented on Lacanian psychoanalysis, use Jamesonian Marxism. But that's not what I'm asking you to do. Just so you know, there's an alternate reality there where this could have been much worse. Okay, so that's the paper materials part. Next, how will it be graded? If you remember, we talked about what makes for a good interpretation. You guys remember? Sorry? Relevance, right? Whatever you say has to be related to what you're interpreting. Comprehensiveness, try to explain as much of the thing as you can. Concision, did I say concision? I don't think I said concision. Try to be concise, but that's not a core like requirement. Coherence. It has to make sense. Don't just throw random shit onto the page. Cohesion. Not only should it make sense, but it should make sense for the reader who reads it. It should follow a certain kind of order that makes the ideas come together in a good way. So the four key elements of a good interpretation: relevance or relatedness, comprehensiveness, coherence, and cohesion. I have translated that into a grading rubric. Breadth and accuracy of evidence is relatedness and comprehensiveness. Accuracy is relatedness, right? Make sure you know what you're talking about. Breadth is comprehensiveness. How widely, how much does your answer explain? Now, in order to make sure that like my judgments are objective, the standard for this breadth and accuracy will be every time you bring up evidence, every time you use someone else's ideas, please give me the title of your source and the page number. Even if you're quoting from the course packet, you can say like the title of the essay, or you can just say course packet and then give me a page number. If you bring in other stuff, same thing. If you bring in a dictionary, you can just say like dictionary and then the word that is being defined. The second one, logic. This is it's really coherence. Logic here means, do your ideas make sense together? It's cohesion and coherence. Let's call it cohesion, right? Do your ideas flow together well? Does it make sense when you go from first point to the second point to the third point? And then finally, coherence, same word. So we're really talking about give a good interpretation. So like the source thing, this is an open book exam. The book part is not optional. So every time you say something that someone else said or an idea that you learned or read about in this class, you should be able to tell me where you found that idea. You might have your own ideas. You might connect ideas with your own thinking, and that part, of course, you don't need to provide a source. But everything else that you learned in this class, give me a source and a page number. Let's see. You can ask me questions. That's why I'm here. The exam length, it doesn't say, but the exam length, you will have a maximum of 175 minutes for the exam. So we're going to begin at 4:50. We're going to go all the way to 7:45. You can hand in early if you want. That's the maximum length of time. And then finally, you only have to hand in the answer sheet. I'm going to give you a standard Mingchuan University exam answer sheet. Looks like this, 4 pages. I'll prepare 2 for every person just in case. So when I say just in case, it could either mean if you have a lot to say or if you fuck up your first try, right? So you only have to hand in that one. You can keep your question sheets for yourself. Any questions so far? I'm not done yet, but do you have questions so far? Yes. I didn't say whether it will or will not involve the man in the well. I said I will not ask you to use Lacanian psychoanalysis only to interpret the man in the well. Yes. This exam is worth, I believe, 30%. Yes. No minimum word count. If you can blow my mind with a single sentence, you can give it your best shot. But it is 30 points. Other questions so far? Okay, so I did mention this is an open-ended exam question. There are no standard answers. I'm only looking at the quality of your interpretation. So your answer might say something completely opposite to the answer of the person next to you. And if both interpretations fulfill those 4 rubric standards, you might get equally high scores. Right? So I don't have like a fixed answer in mind. And if you don't give that answer, you fail. I'm really looking at these 3 or 4 things, right? The quality of your interpretation. Okay, let's move on to some examples. So because I know you don't have a lot of experience with essay questions, I have uploaded some examples for you. These are carefully selected answers from other essay questions for other of my classes. In other words, you will find no useful information in these essays, but you can consider how they are written, which is part of why I selected them as examples. It's a OneDrive folder. So first of all, I want to show you a bad example. Do not write your answer like this. All right, so the question is for the play, The Tragical History of Dr. Faustus, blah, 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 or blah. Like there's a long series of questions, right? And then it says, give 4 reasons from throughout the play to explain. So this answer, it answers the question, right? The question is when, and it does give us a when. But then look at what it does. This is basically not an essay. This is a hidden bullet point list. It's a list of items without the actual bullet point. You'll also notice that it says things like at the end of the play, and then the character does something, but there are no page numbers. The character urges him, but there are no quotations. The entire logic of the first point is carried by the word indicates. That's the only word that explains the connection between the evidence and why this answer chooses this moment. Same thing in the second one. Throughout the play, okay, where throughout the play? Right, so like this is an answer that has no specific evidence, has no sources or page numbers, has no quotations or paraphrases of quotations, and is barely an essay itself. As some of you might have guessed, this one was written with AI. So now let's look at, I hope I can cancel this. Let's look at no, I can't. A better example. Same question, but answered in a much better format. So once again, we begin with the answer, a when. But then when this person talks about the beginning of the play, we have a quotation with quotation marks. We have, it's a play, so it has line numbers. For you guys, you don't have line numbers, you have to give them page numbers. So you have a specific location. Many chances. So the first chance, again, you have a specific quotation and location marker. Same here. In this answer, or this point, you have 2 pieces of evidence with location markers, etc. So this is a better way to answer the question. Now, this one was written by a student. Let me show you one that I wrote. This is an answer to a different question. What do you think this short story is trying to say? I begin with the answer, right? It's a specific thing that the story is trying to say. And then I basically follow the order of events in the story to explain how each part of the story helps to build that central idea. So sometimes we have a quotation with page number. Sometimes we will have a paraphrase with page number, right? I don't give you the quotation, but it's a specific point. It's a specific thing. So there is a page number. Right. And then you have a conclusion explaining and summarizing the argument that you're trying to make. Now, I did write this, but I wrote this during the middle of a very heavy head cold. So it may not be a perfect answer. But it is a reference that you can check to see, like, how specific do I have to be? How specific a piece of evidence warrants a quotation in a page number? That kind of thing. And so we have a lot of other examples here that you can look at. Some of these are poetry, some of these are stories. That's for you to look at and consider and think about. Does that give you a better idea of what you should be doing? Yeah, so going back to this diabolical PDF, the second question is asking you your understanding of something. For this thing, if it requires specific evidence and page numbers, you should still give me the specific evidence and page numbers. Your understanding of this thing will be based on the parts of the thing that you have perceived. And if those parts have titles and page numbers, you should give those to me in your answer. Okay, and then finally, if you have terrible luck and you forgot to bring your paper materials to class next week, tell me and I'll tell you what to do. It's not going to be pretty, but there is a way. Okay, so that's the final exam next week. Do you have questions? Yes. Relevance, comprehensiveness, cohesion, coherence. And if you forget again, it's basically these four. Breadth is comprehensiveness, accuracy is relevance, logic is cohesion, and coherence is coherence. Okay, other questions? Yes. 175 minutes, which is 5 minutes short of 3 hours. It'll go from 450 to 7:45. Other questions? Okay, so at this point, I think you're kind of worried about your score. So here are a few quick announcements. Today, you should upload your last journal entry. That's worth 10 points, 5 points, 5 points. That's worth 5 points. Yeah. Which is better than not having 5 points. If you're group 6, remember to upload the peer review sheets so that I know who did what and can give you guys a grade. The deadline for that is also today. Yeah, I think there's like a late period, but don't try my patience. Okay, finally, I never ask you to do something that I think is impossible. But if it does turn out to be impossible for you to pass this course, I have offered you a way out. It's called extra credit. Now, before I introduce the extra credit, I should tell you 2 things about this. 1, it is not easy. This is not a get out of jail free card. You do have to work at it. But 2, it's not a punishment either. I am going to ask you, if you want to do this, to do something that I believe is meaningful and that I believe you will learn from. So even if you think you will pass, you are also encouraged to try the extra credit. The deadline is basically before I have to submit your grades, which is week 19, Thursday, 1 p.m. So you have a lot of time. Now, what is this extra credit? Read the following selections from a study of Harvard college students in the 1950s and 1960s. That is this PDF file here. Reflect on your own college life from this same perspective. In other words, this extract will have some ideas related to college life. They will have a certain perspective. Please use those ideas and perspectives and think about your own college experience so far. Then turn your reflections into an essay of at least 1,000 meaningful words or 2,000 in Chinese if you happen to know Chinese. If you want to use another language, you can, but if I throw it into Google Translate, it has to come out as 1,000 English words. So that's a good way for you to check as well. And then submit it here in the submission area. As it says, you can use other languages, but the English output from Google Translate must be at least 1,000 words. The more details and analysis that you provide, the more meaningful your essay may be. Mindless use of AI does not produce meaningful words. So that's basically it, right? Read this, think about it, think about your life, and then write something of at least 1,000 words. Now, there is one trap that I want to warn you about. If you prefer using Google Docs, I ask you to upload something, right? So you can't submit a link. You have to submit a Word file or RTF file, something like that. Not a PDF, some kind of text Word file. Now, if you use Google Docs and you save as Microsoft Word document, it might look like this. What's wrong with this picture? Yeah, it's not 5 words, it's 5 letters. So the program is treating each letter as a word. As you can see, right, there's a floating S. There's a second half of what looks like the word expectations. If this happens to you, you might think it's 1,000 words. It's actually 200. So, like, before you submit, pay attention to what your file looks like. If this happens to you, I am very sorry to say I've only found one way to fix this, and it's very annoying. So as it says, if you write in Google Docs and save as a Microsoft Word file, you may encounter this problem. To solve it, copy your essay, paste it into something that is not Google Docs and not Microsoft Word. Good luck finding that. Open a new Microsoft Word document, copy your essay from that new place, and then paste it in the new document and then save. Just very annoying. And if you run into this problem and you want an accurate word count, I recommend the website wordcounter.net, which does not have this problem. Okay, questions about the extra credit? Like, I do hope that if you do this, you try your best on the first try. But if I don't think your submission deserves extra credit, I will leave a feedback comment on Moodle, and you should get an email from Moodle if you have turned on your notifications. In other words, you can try again. Okay, questions about extra credit? Oh, yeah. How much extra credit, right? If you do this, how much do you get, right? If your original, I'll calculate these. I will look at your submissions and I will calculate your score. Oh, sorry. I will look at your submissions after I calculate your grade for everything else. And when I look at your submissions, if your original course grade is below 60 and you do this and you do it well, I'll give you 60. If your original course grade is 60 or above and you do this well, I will give you an extra between 2 and 7 points, depending on what I had for breakfast that day. Sound good, right? If your course grade is 80 and you do this well, you might get between a final grade of 82 to 88, which is not nothing. And if for some reason 60 is not a high enough grade level for you because you have some kind of requirement or something, talk to me, we can negotiate. Okay, so if you don't have questions about extra credit, you'll also see one last section on this Moodle page. I believe you all have selected, most of you have selected Advanced Seminar 2 next year. So have you guys looked at the course system to see what we're doing? No? Anyone curious? I mean, I don't know. If I show you now, would that distract you from the final exams? Possibly. Let's take a vote. Who wants the red pill? Who wants the blue pill? So if you want to find out now, raise your hand. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, 8. Okay, thank you. If you don't want to find out right now, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The phone doesn't count. Okay, so by the thinnest of margins, let's take the plunge. I'm still not finished with course prep, so this is tentative, but it's basically going to look like this. Course description. In this 16-week required course to be taught in English, students will prepare and teach a roughly 6-week undergraduate level course, 2 hours per week. Students will determine the topic, content, pedagogy, lesson plans, assessments, and division of labor, including the division of labor for this semester. The first half of the semester will comprise progress report presentations and further discussion and planning. The second half will be teaching the course to the rest of the class and to the instructor. So I'll be your student. The final week will be the final assessment to be determined by the assessment team or whoever is responsible for assessments. After which, if you have teams, each team leader and each student will upload a work report. So the schedule kind of looks like this. For the first half, you guys will be preparing a course. And for the second half, you will be teaching a course. So this semester, I have assigned your topics. I have divided you into groups. Each group is doing a separate thing. Next semester, you guys as a class choose a topic. You guys as a class teach that topic. And you guys as a class decide how to grade yourselves. Yes. Right. So why am I here, right? So how many of you have experience teaching at a college level? Right. So that's why I'm here. I'm here to offer guidance, support, explanations, make sure things don't go too crazy. I want to draw your attention to 2 aspects, okay, like multiple aspects of the syllabus. The grading, journal entries, and for next semester, there will be a requirement. So you can't just submit a screenshot of your like speed run of something. It must be newly personally written prose or verse. Verse means poetry, prose means not poetry. So what is excluded? Is that all there is? Poetry and not poetry? Informational texts. If it is newly and personally written, that's fine. So this is excluding, I had a few students, I believe not in this class, but I had a few students upload practice question sheets. I had students who were filming something upload a shot list, right? These are not prose and not poetry. Don't upload those things. So it's something that you write for that entry has to be new, something you write. Personal is defined as it feels like nobody else could have written it. So if you only write like, wow, this week's discussion was intense. I sure learned a lot. I have a lot of new things to think about. That's not personal. All right, it has to be something I feel like only you could have written. You can imagine why I added that. Right, so no blank pages, no AI bullshit. Individual contributions, 25%. This will be based on that final report that you upload and that your team leader, if you have teams, uploads, right? Each team leader and each student will upload a work report. I'll read all of them and I'll determine how much each person actually did to contribute to the team effort or the class effort. Again, this will not be a linear scale. I'm not going to be like, oh, the person who contributed the least gets 0 points. No, but I will look at if it feels like a meaningful level of contribution. Now, there will be around 60 people in the class. You will be preparing for around 6 to 7 weeks and teaching for 6 weeks. That's actually not a lot of stuff for each person to do. So you might have to find things to do. You might have to, I don't know, compete for things to do. If you're sitting in the back playing an MMORPG every week, you're not going to be able to do a lot. And then the assessment. So as it says, you as a class will also determine how to assess your learning. That assessment will make up 50%. In other words, you guys, through some mechanism or division of labor or some logic, will determine how to decide your 50% of your grade. Now, as a means of quality control, I have added this caveat. For the people in charge of designing the assessment, because you know how the assessment will look, you can prepare ahead of time. So if you are a member of the people who are in charge of assessment, your 50% will be the lowest of either the class average or my grade. I will also be doing the assessment. So in other words, if I do brilliantly and the rest of the class sucks, your grade will also suck. But if everybody colludes to share the answers and I do poorly, your grade will also suck. So your goal is to make sure both the class and myself understand and are fairly assessed. Now, you might think, okay, I'll just give like a really simple exam, like true or false, 10 questions, right? No. If your original like grade, like the lowest of the average or my grade, if that lower score rounds up to 100, your score will be 70. If it rounds up to 98 or 99, your score will be 80. And if it rounds up to 95 to 97, your score will be 90. This is to prevent overly easy assessments. You don't have to worry about the math. I'll worry about the math. You can use whatever AI you want, but I'm going to be treating it at the same high standard. Let's see, what else? And for the midterm week, you get to watch a movie and relax for 1 week. Yeah. So that's basically what we're going to be doing next semester. The first week introduction, I'm going to be spending some time talking about college level teaching, things to pay attention to, guidelines. Week 2 is when you decide your topic. And we're going to use the method that the United States Congress uses to decide on amendments to proposed bills. they do what's called a votorama, which is a long series of up or down votes. As I said, you guys can choose the topic. So everyone can propose a topic with a 5-minute presentation. You don't have to make slides. All you have to do is come up here and talk. So everyone can propose a topic. After each proposal, we immediately vote if you want to do it or not. And if the majority want, or the plurality, I guess, the most number of people wants to do it, we set it aside. If they don't want to do it, it gets killed. And then for the second round, we take all of those remaining topics and then we choose one. So the first level is, do enough people have interest? And the second level is, which one has the most interest? Now, this also means if you don't propose something, we're going to be doing something your classmate wants. And it may not be something that you want. There's an additional limitation. I will not let you propose anything that you are currently studying. Nothing that you have taken a college class on or will be taking that class next semester concurrently. So it can be serious. You can, I don't know, propose like the physics of space travel, or it can be very fun, like the evolutionary biology of Pokemon. I don't really care as long as it's something we can spend 6 weeks talking about. Now, some of you might have noticed a blind spot. What if no proposal gets past the first stage? Nobody has anything that proposes anything that everyone is interested in. Or even, what if for the second week we show up and nobody proposes anything? I have a plan B. And it's not pretty, but I do have it. Yeah. You guys have experienced how I teach a course this semester. I'm not sure if you want to do that again next semester. So, you're encouraged to propose something. Okay, yeah, so that's basically what we're going to be doing next semester. Do you guys have questions? Okay, so we have reached basically the end of this semester. You only have an exam next, one journal entry, and then one exam, and then you're done.